Hi everyone, you're with Tesla Tom. Thanks so much for joining us on Ludicrous Feed. Today we're going to do another virtual road trip, this time between Sydney and Adelaide. But before we get into it, I want to address a couple of concerns raised by viewers from previous videos. So previously I did a road trip planning video between Sydney and Brisbane, and there was a section of road between Grafton and Port Macquarie where a better route planner asked the Hyundai Kona EV, which was the example vehicle I had, to slow down between that section of road to 80 kilometers an hour. I had the cycle between 20 and 80% of the battery, and some said that was a bit conservative. So what I've done is I've increased that cycle between 5 to 90%. And as you can see in this slide here, a better route planner is much happier with that, and there's no restriction on the speed limit. And in fact, it told us that the car can shave 1 hour off its time to get from Sydney to Brisbane based on that new 5 to 90% battery cycle. Another question was, can variants of the Model 3 do the same trip between Sydney and Melbourne and Sydney to Brisbane? It sure can. So what I've done here is I compared the SR Plus to the Performance Model 3. As you can see, it's not much slower between Sydney and Melbourne, with the battery between 10 to 90%. So the Performance Model 3 takes 9 hours and 47 minutes, and the SR Plus takes 10 hours and 10 minutes. That's not much difference at all in the grand scheme of things. And then between Sydney and Brisbane, for a similar battery cycle, 10 to 90%, Performance took 10 hours and 51 minutes, and the SR Plus took 11 hours and 16 minutes, so about half an hour more for that trip. Alright, so let's plan another trip today between Sydney and Adelaide and see whether a better route planner can do that in one day, basically. So let's put Sydney up here, and we'll put Adelaide there. Let's have a look at the settings. So we've got departure at 90%, that's fine. And I've got our Tesla Model 3 Performance minus here as the car to start with. Let's have a look at the battery cycle. Let's see, 10% arrival for each destination and for each charger, that's fine. And then the charger max to 90%, that's also okay. And then the weight of 25 kilograms for luggage. And I think we'll leave it at that. So let's have a look. Let's see what a better route planner comes up with. Okay, so the website is telling us it's going to take 17 hours and 26 minutes. A straight shot would take 15 hours of a distance of 1,508 kilometers between Sydney and Adelaide. And so the car has to charge for 1 hour and 35 minutes between the two cities. Let's have a look at the charging sites now. So from Sydney to Goulburn is a Tesla charger, which will take 10 minutes. And then to Tarcutta, which is a new site by EV Networks. Let's have a look at that. So at this site, apparently there are two 350 kilowatt stalls and two 100 kilowatt stalls. And it's telling me that I have to be there for 25 minutes and it will charge the car from 10 to 81%. I'll come back to that in 1 second and we'll work out how much that would cost us. The next one is ChargeFox at Euroa. It will have to charge from 10 to 60% for 15 minutes. And again, I'll come back to that, with how much that would cost. And then we'll cut across, skipping Melbourne to Bendigo. That would take 12 minutes to charge the car from 25 to 56%. And then across to Horsham, it'll take 17 minutes to charge from 10 to 54%. And then from Horsham to Keith, ChargeFox, again, that's a paid site, from 10 to 65%. That will take 17 minutes. And then on to Adelaide with 10% left to spare. Before I work out how much that would cost, I want to tell you how much difference it is if you were just to use Tesla chargers. So keep that in mind, 17 hours and 26 minutes. Let's play with the settings here. Let's have a look. Let's change it to Tesla only, because if you've got supercharging credit, then this would be a free trip for you. So let's see how long a better route planner takes. So 17 hours and 44. So not much difference at all, really, between using Tesla and non-Tesla chargers. So let's go back to using all, and we'll just go through that EV site just for your interest. So let's have a look at where Tarcutta is. It's just south of Gundagai. That's the Gundagai charger there for Tesla. We'll just look down here. There are apparently 2 ChargeMo stations and 2 CCS stations, and the ChargeMo can get you to 100 kilowatts, and the CCS ones can get you to 350. So let's look at the pictures now. It looks like it's right next to the service station that's existing. Looks like a Caltex, and it looks like it's, in this photo here, it's being tested and it's set up. I would assume there are 4 stalls, given that there are 2 ChargeMo and 2 CCS. I could be wrong. Let's have a look at the next picture. Although interestingly, there's actually 2 cords hanging off each stall. So maybe there are only 2 stalls, but there are 4 plugs. I guess that makes sense too. Yep, so on a closer inspection, yes, there are 2 CCS chargers and 2 CHAdeMO chargers. That's interesting, I guess, because what happens if you've got 2 cars or 4 cars wanting to charge, unless it's a shared charger where you can only use that charger, but it's got a CCS and a CHAdeMO port. So I think that's probably most likely, because I'm not sure whether they can share power like that. I'll have to research that for you. Or if someone's been there, please let me know whether you can actually share that one stall or one unit between 2 cars. Okay, so that's the tar cutter, and I'm going to tell you how much that would cost to charge there. Let's just go back here. So that tar cutter site, it's going to take 25 minutes to charge between 10 to 81%. So let's start with the time first, because EV does charge by time. So if it takes 25 minutes to charge and it costs 25 cents per minute, it would cost you 25 minutes times 25 cents. So that's $6.25 just for the time component. And if you look at how much charge you need, so you need about 70% to get from 10 to 81% charge. So 70% of a 75 kilowatt hour performance Model 3 battery is 52 kilowatt hours, which you need to get your car to that 80% charge from 10%. So if you multiply that number of kilowatt hours by what EV's charging, which is 35 cents per kilowatt hour, that's $18. And then on top of the $6.25 for the time-based charging, that's $24 to charge at EV. So keep that in mind. So ChargeFox at Euroa, let's have a look here. There we are. So to get from 10 to 60%, that's 50% of your battery. So let's go back to my calculator. So 50% of a 75 kilowatt hour battery is 37.5 kilowatt hours, and you get charged 40 cents per kilowatt hour at ChargeFox, so times 0.4. So that's $15 for ChargeFox. And of course, if you've got supercharging credit for Tesla, that's free. Tesla charges 42 cents per kilowatt hour for their use. Okay, so that's Sydney to Adelaide with the Performance Model 3. So you can get there within 24 hours, even if you stop for charging each way. And a shout out to Dr. Sally and Sid EV, our good friends at a Phantom Lane 4 podcast. They're planning this road trip after the restrictions from coronavirus are lifted. So a shout out to you guys from this video. So let's change this car now to an SR Plus. So Tesla Model 3 SR Plus, and see whether that makes any difference at all. Keeping in mind it was about 17 hours for a performance Model 3. So it's telling me it's going to take 18 hours and 22 minutes for the SR Plus, and that's only about half an hour more than it would take for a performance Model 3. So interestingly, it doesn't ask me to use any non-Tesla chargers along this route. Okay, well let's do something interesting now. Let's change this car once again to a Hyundai Kona EV, which is our alternative car that we use, or that I use anyway, to judge these distances and these times. So, alright, Hyundai Kona EV. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop this down to 5%, just to make our Hyundai owners happy. And we'll see how long that takes to get from Sydney to Adelaide in a Hyundai Kona EV. Okay, so 21 hours and 16 minutes with some restrictions I can see. So let's review this trip. There's an option here for a quicker journey, which I'll go through as well. So 21 hours is about 4 hours longer than a Tesla performance, and about 3 hours longer than a SR Plus. So let's review this journey. So stop at Goulburn ChargeFox for 16 minutes to get from 29 to 60%. And then stop at Annie Pyers Drive, another ChargeFox site, which is near Gundagai, I believe. And then at Barnawartha North for ChargeFox, which is near Albury, to charge from 5 to 56%. That's a half an hour charge. And then to Euroa, that's a 38-minute charge from 15 to 81%. And then on to Ballarat, 5 to 87%, 53 minutes. And then from Ballarat into... by the way, from Euroa to Ballarat, you've got to pass Melbourne as well, at least on the outskirts of Melbourne. I can see there. Let's just see what it does there. Yep, looks like it's sort of a ring road bypass around Melbourne. And then from Ballarat to Keith in South Australia, you've got to slow down to 70 kilometers an hour to hypermile it to get between the two sites, otherwise you won't make it. Because that's a long trip there, 5 hours and 44 minutes for a 388 kilometer drive. I think the range of a Kona EV is about 500 kilometers. Okay, and then from Keith on to Adelaide, it's a bit of a more civilized drive, 5 to 72%, 37-minute charge at Keith to get to Adelaide by 5%. Let's have a look at this alternate route here between Sydney and Adelaide using a route via Mildura. Apparently we saved 24 minutes, so let's click that. Yep. So 20 hours and 27 minutes. Let's review this trip here. So Sydney to Goulburn, that's fine, that's fairly standard. Goulburn to Gundagai, Anipires Drive, or near Gundagai, and then on to Narrandera Park. Let's see what kind of charger that is. That is 50 kilowatts, so I assume that's an NRMA charger. And that would take a 24-minute charge, 30 to 54%. Then on to Hay, another NRMA charger, 5 to 88%. 1 hour and 8-minute charge. It's a long charge, that one. And then onto Mildura, another long charge, 1 hour and 13 minutes, 5 to 91%. So that's all fairly normal driving until you get to Mildura. And this is where it gets interesting. So I'm going to zoom right in here. You've got to drive at 70 kilometers an hour to restrict your driving, because between Mildura and your next charger in Adelaide, that's a long distance. So 148 plus 244 is about, another 388 kilometer charge without a charger in between. And then you get to Adelaide with 5%, so that's quite tight, I've got to say. And to make it more interesting, when you get to the town of Lyrup, sorry if I pronounced that wrong for the locals there, or Lyrup in South Australia, there is something very interesting here. I'm just going to click there. So there's a ferry between the two sides of the Murray. I've tried to look up exactly what the ferry times are. I think it runs for 24 hours. I couldn't get too much information without actually calling them up. So let me just show you what it looks like. Okay, so the Lyrup ferry, or the Lyrup ferry, looks like this. And I'll just see if I can find a picture. There we go. So the distance doesn't look like much, depending on the camera you use, I suppose. But certainly is a ferry there to get between the two sides of the Murray. So I guess depending on how long the journey is, how often the ferry runs, it will affect your journey times, obviously. So yeah, interesting there. And again, depending on the weather as well, if you've got to wait for that ferry, that might affect your range too, if it's a hot day, for example. So guys, that's your choice if you're driving a Kona EV, whether you want to take the risk with the ferry and then a hypermile there, or you take this longer route between Sydney and the outskirts of Melbourne and then Adelaide. But again, you've got to hypermile it here too between Ballarat and Keith, unless you can find a slower charger here, because I didn't actually select that, but I will do that for you just to see whether you can mitigate that risk a little bit. Let's see if I put level 2 as well. Let's see whether that does anything. Okay, so with the with the Type 2 charger, it doesn't make much difference. It's still asking you to hypermile between Ballarat and Keith. And then for this one here, this little shortcut, same thing. In fact, it's slower for some reason. It's asking you to charge up here at this point in the Adelaide Hills Business Centre for some reason. So not much difference there between using an additional Type 2 slow charger compared to just using fast chargers. Alright guys, well that is it between Sydney and Adelaide. It looks like you can do it fairly comfortably in a Tesla Model 3, regardless of whether it's a Performance or an SR+. It might be a little bit harder in a Hyundai Kona EV with a few restrictions along the way. Alright guys, well thanks for watching. That's my road trip video, or my virtual road trip video between Sydney and Adelaide. Hope you guys are doing well. Stay safe, and don't forget, you'll never charge alone. See you next time.